It started as a sketch. A single line on the edge of an architectural draft, something curved, delicate, and almost cruel. That was how Lina Duarte always began her designs, with beauty, hiding intent. The firm called her a visionary. He called her his muse. But that was before she found the message on his tablet, the one from the client's assistant, full of the kind of intimacy that doesn't belong in blueprints. Evan Price, senior partner, mentor, lover, thief. He had taken her design, pitched it under his name, and whispered that betrayal sounded better in marble. She didn't cry. She measured. Revenge, for her, was geometry. Every angle, every edge, calculated to collapse when the right weight pressed against it. She decided to create a new project, an affair, but not of the body. A performance, a seduction of architecture and ego. She found her collaborator at a gallery opening, Marek Valenti, an Italian structural engineer with a voice like gravel and a reputation for ruin. He was famous for buildings that seemed to breathe, then break. "I need a design that looks perfect but dies when loved too much," she told him over whiskey. He raised an eyebrow. "Like a person?" She smiled. "Exactly." They began meeting late, sketching over candlelight, their hands brushing against the same paper. It wasn't love. It was conspiracy disguised as intimacy. Each touch was an exchange of purpose. She told him about Evan only in fragments, how he'd taken her ideas, how he'd taken her body, how she had stopped knowing which loss hurt more. Marek never judged. He only drew. When the project was approved, a tower for Evan's newest client, a private commission with no oversight, Lina handed over the plans herself. "It's my apology for leaving," she told him, voice steady. He didn't question why the foundations seemed too elegant to be practical. Construction began in spring. By summer, Evan was everywhere. Press conferences, interviews. The golden boy of design reborn. He mentioned her once, in passing, as a former colleague. That word stung more than betrayal. It was an erasure. Lina watched him through screens, memorizing the way success made him sloppy. The building rose floor by floor, a spine of glass against the Los Angeles sky. She visited the site often, walking among the noise and dust, tracing the steel columns like veins. Marek was always nearby, silent, watching her like someone who knew they were inside another person's confession. The tower opened in September. Its top floor, the Sky Pavilion, was Evan's stage. A celebration for investors, champagne, lights, and music that pretended nothing could fall. Lina arrived uninvited, wearing white instead of black. He saw her the moment she entered, his smile faltering just enough for her to feel it. "You came," he said, kissing the air beside her cheek. "I designed it," she replied, and he laughed because he thought she meant the building. At midnight, the glass began to sing. It started low, a vibration barely audible beneath the music. Marek stood near the window, one hand in his pocket, the other on a control panel disguised as lighting. The structure wasn't collapsing, it was transforming. Each pane of glass shifted subtly inward, bending light until the reflections multiplied. The crowd saw themselves everywhere, faces warped, doubled, disoriented. Then the lights cut. In the flicker, the mirrored walls showed Lina and Evan standing together in endless repetition, every version of them arguing silently, embracing, breaking. "Do you hear that?" Evan whispered. The hum grew louder, a perfect resonance. "It's the sound of symmetry failing," she said. He turned toward her, confusion slicing through charm. "What did you do?" She leaned close enough for him to smell the ghost of jasmine in her hair. "I built you a monument," she said, "to your own collapse." The lights snapped back on. No one was hurt. The walls had not cracked. But every reflection was slightly wrong. Each guest saw themselves smiling a second too late. The illusion held until morning. By then, news had already broken. The tower's structure was unsound, the materials falsified. The engineering signatures missing. Merrick Valenti was gone. So was the control device. Only one name remained on every document: Evan Price. They said he had known nothing. They said it was sabotage. They said a lot of things. But what stayed true was this: his license was revoked, his company dissolved. And his name became shorthand for hubris in glass. Months later, Lena walked by the abandoned site. The tower still stood, though no one entered it. The sunlight caught its fractured reflections, and for a moment, she saw herself beside him again, both of them younger, unbroken. Building something they thought could last. She almost smiled. Then she noticed a small crack running up one of the mirrored panels, thin but growing. She touched it with her fingertip. The glass was warm, pulsing faintly, as if remembering the night it learned to break. Somewhere inside, a low hum returned, softer this time. Almost like forgiveness. Or warning. It had been 6 months since the night the tower sang itself open. Los Angeles had already moved on. It always did. A new scandal, a new face, a new fall. Only the structure remained. Evan Price's tower, gleaming but hollow. Sealed behind metal gates like a monument no one wanted to visit. Lena passed it every week on her way downtown. The way some people visit a grave but refuse to bring flowers. She told herself she wasn't checking on it. She was measuring silence. Evan had disappeared from the news, but his absence felt heavier than presence. There were whispers: rehab, Europe, a nervous breakdown. None of them satisfied her. Revenge wasn't supposed to leave questions. It was supposed to end cleanly, like a building that fell when planned. But this one hadn't. It stood, defiant, and sometimes she swore she could still hear that faint hum whenever the wind moved through the glass. She had not seen Merrick Valenti since the night of the unveiling. His number went dead. His studio emptied. The contractor who'd worked with them said he'd left the country. Maybe that was true. Or maybe he'd never existed at all. The thought didn't frighten her, it only made sense. Revenge was a lonely architecture. You built it alone, even when you thought you had help. One morning, she received a letter, no stamp, no sender, only her name written in that sharp, mathematical handwriting she recognized. Inside was a single line: symmetry doesn't end when one side breaks. No signature. But she knew. That night, she dreamed of the tower again. In the dream, she was standing on the top floor, barefoot, surrounded by mirrors that breathed. Her reflection looked older, her eyes darker. Evan was there too, but not as she remembered. His face was cracked down the middle, like a porcelain mask that refused to fall. "You built me wrong," he said. She woke up to the sound of wind scraping against the windows. Or maybe it was glass humming again. The next day, she drove to the site. The gates were unlocked, swinging slightly in the wind. No security. No warning signs. Just silence. The air inside smelled of dust and cold metal. As she stepped through the lobby, her footsteps echoed too long. Like the space was repeating her movements a beat behind. The elevator still worked. She pressed the button for the Sky Pavilion. It lit up without hesitation. The doors opened to an empty floor bathed in blue light. The city glittered below, but the reflections in the glass didn't match it. They shimmered out of sync, slightly delayed, as if the building was remembering old guests. In one panel, she saw herself standing next to someone, Evan, or Merrick. Or both, but when she turned, no one was there. Then a voice spoke from the far end of the room. "I thought you'd come sooner." He stepped out of the dim light, older, thinner. The arrogance gone but the precision still intact. Evan. His hair had gone silver at the edges, and his hands trembled when he moved them. "I had to see it," he said. "I thought if I understood how it broke, I could understand why you did it." Lena didn't move. "And did you?" He laughed softly. "You didn't just destroy me, you trapped me in something alive. Do you know the tower still hums? Only at night, like it's breathing. Sometimes it says my name." "You should have listened to it," she said. He smiled, small, human, almost tender. "I did. It asked for you." She walked toward him, slow steps echoing. "You built your empire on my work," she said. "You sold it, stole it, and still thought I'd orbit you forever. I didn't think you'd burn the sun to prove a point. That's what visionaries do." The glass behind him flickered, showing dozens of their reflections arguing, embracing, betraying. A hall of possible versions. Evan turned toward them, mesmerized. "It keeps showing us. I think it wants to start over." "Buildings don't want anything," she said. "Then why does it whisper your name?" The hum rose again, low, vibrating through the floor. The reflections moved even when they didn't. She saw herself step closer, though she hadn't moved. One of her mirrored selves touched his face, another whispered something she couldn't hear. The glass shimmered red, then black. Evan reached out, his hand trembling against the reflection. "Tell me you're not proud of this," he said. "I am," she whispered. Then the reflection cracked. A sound like a sigh filled the room. The lights dimmed. The hum stopped. The silence afterward was total, like the building had exhaled its last secret. When Lena opened her eyes, she was standing alone. No Evan. Only the mirrored walls, smooth again, showing her face multiplied into infinity. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The air felt heavier now, the kind of stillness that hides aftershocks. Outside, the tower's reflection in a nearby skyscraper shimmered strangely, as if someone was still standing at the top, watching her leave. She didn't look back. The next morning, the papers ran a headline: "Fairfax Tower demolished overnight, no witnesses. No owner of record." Lena closed the newspaper, washed her hands, and turned on the tap. The water came out clear at first, then faintly red, like a memory dissolving. She let it run until it turned clean again. When she looked up, the mirror above the sink hesitated before showing her reflection. By the time winter settled over Los Angeles, the city had already erased the Fairfax Tower from its skyline. A hollow space remained, one of those absences you can still feel when you look too long at the horizon. Lena sometimes caught herself tracing its outline in the air while waiting at red lights, her fingers following invisible geometry. People said the demolition had been scheduled months in advance. That it was a safety precaution, that no one had owned the structure in years. But she knew better. Buildings didn't erase themselves unless they wanted to. The firm where she used to work sent her an invitation, an alumni gala. An evening of champagne and nostalgia. She deleted it, but the thought lingered. Nostalgia was just revenge rewritten with prettier lighting. She hadn't designed anything in months. Not since the letter. Not since that night inside the ghost tower when she'd seen him, or thought she had. The sound of his voice still clung to her ribs. "It asked for you." One morning, she found a package outside her door. No label, no note. Inside, a miniature model of the Fairfax Tower, carved from transparent resin. No taller than her hand. Perfect in proportion. When she held it to the light, the interior shimmered, refracting the sun into red veins. Something small moved inside, a trick of light, or something else. She set it on her desk and told herself it was only a souvenir someone had left as a cruel joke, but the next night it began to hum. It was faint at first, almost like the murmur of air trapped in glass. Then, a rhythm, a pulse. She unplugged every electronic device in the apartment. The sound remained, steady, patient, mechanical like breath. She pressed her ear to the model. For a second, she swore she heard her name. Sleep came in fragments after that. She'd wake to find the model glowing faintly on her nightstand. The walls breathing with her heartbeat. Once, she dreamed that she was inside it, the miniature tower. The rooms looping endlessly upward. Each floor had mirrors for walls, and in every reflection, a version of her stood with someone she could never quite recognize. One had Merrick's hands, another Evan's eyes, another her own voice whispering. Symmetry doesn't end when one side breaks. When she woke, her hands were covered in fine dust that glimmered like powdered glass. She decided to destroy it. She took the model to her balcony, lifted it high, and dropped it onto the pavement below. It didn't shatter. It bounced once and landed upright, humming louder. That night, someone knocked on her door. 3 times. She didn't open. The peephole showed nothing. But when she turned back, the model was on the kitchen counter. Dry, unbroken, quiet. She laughed then, a sharp, dry sound, and poured herself whiskey. "You're a good design," she told it. "Almost perfect." The next morning, she couldn't find it. The desk was bare. She convinced herself it had been a dream, a byproduct of exhaustion and guilt. She returned to her drafts, tried to sketch something new, anything. But every time she drew a line, it bent toward the same impossible shape. A spiral climbing into nothing. Later that evening, the power flickered. The air in the apartment grew thick, electric. The hum returned, louder, closer. She turned slowly toward the window. Outside, across the street, the reflection on a neighboring building's glass showed the Fairfax Tower standing tall again, lit from within, its outline pulsing red. Her phone vibrated. One new message. No number. Just words. "You built me to break. Come see what happens when I stand." The world tilted slightly, like the city itself was holding its breath. She drove without remembering the decision to move. Downtown was deserted, the streets too clean, too wide. At the sight, the gates stood open again, windless but swaying. She stepped through, heels sinking into wet dust. The tower loomed where it shouldn't exist, rebuilt, alive. Humming like a memory that refused erasure. The glass shimmered under a red glow that had no source. As she crossed the lobby, her reflection followed a half-second late, the same delay as before. Only this time, it smiled first. The elevator waited with its doors open, as if expecting her. She stepped in. The button for the Sky Pavilion was already lit. The ascent was silent except for her pulse and the faint whisper in the vents, "You shouldn't have left." When the doors opened, the top floor was empty except for one thing, the model tower. Now full-sized, sitting in the center of the room like a heart built from light. Inside its transparent frame moved shadows, 2 figures, entwined, indistinguishable. As she approached, the glass rippled. Her own face surfaced on its surface, then split, then doubled. Behind her, a voice said softly, "I told you symmetry doesn't end when one side breaks." She turned. Merrick, or what looked like him, stood in the doorway. His reflection fractured in the mirrored walls. "You're not real," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. The hum became a roar. The walls shimmered red, melting into fluid light. Her reflection reached for her, lips moving in silence. The floor tilted. The air collapsed inward. When she opened her eyes, she was standing on her balcony again. The city below pulsed faintly, as if every building were breathing in rhythm. The miniature tower sat on her railing, glowing faintly. Inside it, two small shadows danced endlessly. She reached for it, but her hand passed straight through the glass. It started as a sketch, a line drawn in anger that curved itself into something too elegant to be honest. 6 months later, Los Angeles had forgotten the tower, but Lena hadn't. The Fairfax site was just a fenced-off wound in the skyline, a hole pretending to be air. And she drove past it like someone touching a scar through their clothes. People said the demolition had been planned. She knew better. You couldn't schedule erasure that perfect. You couldn't plan silence that loud. Her apartment became a museum of things she didn't build, blueprints that never got approved. Models that sat unfinished. One morning, a small box appeared outside her door. No name, no postage, just her own handwriting on the top as if she'd sent it to herself in her sleep. Inside was a miniature of the Fairfax Tower, carved from translucent resin. Beautiful in the way bones are beautiful when they've forgotten the body. She laughed, left it on the counter, told herself she'd throw it out when she had time. That night, it began to hum. The sound was low and steady, like the breath of someone sleeping behind a wall. She unplugged the refrigerator, the lamps, the clock, but the hum stayed, pulsing through the counter and into her wrists when she touched it. She whispered stop, and for a moment it did. Then it whispered back. She didn't sleep for 2 days. When she finally dreamed, she was inside the tower again, walking barefoot through mirrored corridors that folded like lungs. The reflections were wrong, they moved before she did, smiling when she didn't. On the highest floor she found herself standing opposite Evan, or maybe Merrick. Or maybe both of them wearing each other's faces. Their voices overlapped. "You built us wrong." She woke with her hands cut by something thin and glittering. There was glass dust on her sheets. She tried to destroy the model. It refused. She dropped it from the balcony. It landed upright, humming louder. She poured whiskey and watched it shimmer. "You're a good design," she told it. "Almost perfect." The next morning it was gone. She searched every room, even the freezer. Nothing. That night the city outside her window looked different, stretched, as if the streets had rearranged themselves while no one was watching. And then she saw it. In the reflection of a nearby skyscraper, the Fairfax Tower stood again. Tall and lit from within, pulsing faintly red. Her phone buzzed once. No caller ID. The message said, "You built me to break. Come see what happens when I stand." She didn't remember driving downtown. The gates were open, no guards, no sound. The tower rose exactly as before, every pane intact, every flaw corrected. Inside, her footsteps echoed a beat too late, and her reflection hesitated before following. The elevator doors opened without a button being pressed. She stepped in. The ascent was quiet except for her breathing and a whisper in the vents that sounded like her own voice counting backwards. When the doors slid open, the top floor waited, empty but alive. In the center stood the model, only now it was full-sized, transparent. and inside it moved two figures, bound together, circling endlessly. She leaned closer. Their faces shifted. Evan, Merrick, herself. "You shouldn't have left," said a voice behind her. She turned. Merrick stood in the doorway, or maybe just the idea of him, his outline flickering. "You're not real," she said. "Neither are you," he answered. The air vibrated until it felt like the building was exhaling. The mirrored walls melted into red light, and she saw every version of herself, angry, weeping, laughing, designing. The glass cracked inward, forming a perfect circle that pulsed like a heart. She reached out to touch it, and everything folded. When she opened her eyes, she was back home on the balcony. The city below glowed faintly as if each window contained its own heartbeat. The miniature tower sat on the railing, humming softly, its red veins pulsing with something alive inside. Two silhouettes moved within it, small and endless, building each other, breaking, rebuilding again. She reached for it, but her hand went straight through the glass, and the hum followed her pulse until she couldn't tell which belonged to which. She stopped fighting the hum. It was there when she breathed, there when she blinked. A quiet metronome marking the distance between who she had been and what she had made. Days passed without definition. She ate when the light changed and slept only when the city stopped making sense. At night she walked the apartment barefoot, following the sound until it seemed to move just ahead of her, like a heartbeat trying to escape. One evening she found the miniature tower in the bathtub. It was dry, perfectly centered, humming with the slow patience of something waiting to be believed. She lifted it. Inside, tiny rooms flickered to life, offices, staircases, shadows walking in circles. She recognized one of them. The way it moved, the tilt of its head. Hers. She placed it on the kitchen table and sat opposite it like a confession. "What do you want?" she asked. The hum deepened, almost answering. The windows trembled. Her reflection in the glass leaned closer before she did. "You asked for this," the reflection said, mouth moving without sound. "You designed it." She laughed, but it cracked in her throat. "Buildings don't come back," she said. "Then what are you?" it asked. The room flickered. She was standing in the tower again. Only smaller, the walls curving inward like ribs. A red light pulsed through the glass, syncing with her pulse. She saw herself in 1,000 reflections, each version whispering a different sentence. You wanted him to suffer. You wanted him to see you. You wanted to be remembered. Somewhere between the echoes she heard another voice, softer. You wanted to belong to what you built. She closed her eyes and the hum became a steady tone, like a held breath. When she opened them, Evan was there, sitting where the model had been, older and transparent. Eyes like smoked glass. "You didn't just design the building," he said. "You designed the ending." She touched his hand, it felt real until it didn't. "If I made you," she said, "why can't I unmake you?" He smiled with the calm of the dead. "Because I'm not the one still inside." The hum peaked, shaking the floor. The apartment stretched and folded. Outside, the city lights flickered in unison, forming the outline of the tower, alive again. Each window pulsing red. She tried to look away, but her reflection in the glass kept staring, whispering her name. The miniature tower on the table glowed brighter until it cracked open. Light poured out, warm, soft, endless, and when it faded, the apartment was empty. Only the sound remained, faint but constant, breathing where walls should have been. The next morning, neighbors said the unit was vacant, though the rent kept being paid on time. At night, they sometimes saw a red glow through the curtains, steady as a heartbeat. Some said it was the light of an artist working late. Others said the building itself had started dreaming again.